Hello, this is Graham. So far in your journey, you've learnt a number of core counselling skills and begun to practice them in a variety of settings. You'll get better and better at using these as time goes by. The skills themselves don't change. However, being a skilled helper, counsellor or psychotherapist is more than simply having practical conversational skills. They depend on how you use them, and this is where counselling theories are so important. Let's imagine someone who's struggling to find their way in life. They're feeling pretty blue a lot of the time, can't smile much, are sleepy all the time. 30-something, they're in a relationship that bores them a little bit, if they're honest. They don't really like their job. They have friends who are settling down, when they would actually quite like a bit more excitement themselves. They have a job, though it's a bit of a grunge, and their boss is a bit of a pain. Their parents are okay, but just so predictable. And they wish they didn't have that student loan hanging over their head because they feel guilty, and their dad keeps reminding them that they should be when they go beyond Yarmouth on holiday. To help this person, we'll use our counselling skills, but we also need to understand all sorts of other things too. If you're watching this video alone, why not stop it now and ask yourself what kind of things you can think of. Okay, I'll put you out of your misery. We need to understand how the mind works to begin with. What makes someone become blue? How does their mind try to get them out of this? And if it can't do so, then how does it try to stop them feeling dark blue? So we study some psychology and a little bit of medicine even. We need to understand the pressure that society, family, friends, work, money and material things put on them. So we study sociology. Lots of things that people do, especially in relation to other individuals and groups like their family, evolved with us from humans' earliest days of hunter-gatherers, 650,000 years ago. So we study anthropology. Many of our clients have trouble solving problems, so we learn how problem solving and decision making happens. And because we're trying to help them learn new things, we study education and human development theory. Fortunately, we aren't having to do this from scratch. There's a lot of work already being done. Our journey begins with the Greek philosopher Socrates, around 500 BCE. As far as we know, it was Socrates who first taught counselling skills as a life skill. He encouraged his students to adopt an inquisitive mind and to ask open questions to help their own students learn for themselves. This is exactly what we teach today. The formal term is Socratic questioning. You might be surprised by the next person on our trip. Yes, Charles Darwin. Having returned from the Galapagos Islands and revolutionised our understanding of the natural world and of course our own evolution, Darwin turned his attention to emotions. He spent many years studying all the little muscles that cause a mouth to twitch, an eyebrow to flicker, our heart to pump just a little faster so that a vein in our neck vibrates, or a patch of skin beneath our Adam's apple goes red. Darwin published his book on the expression of emotions in animals in 1872, almost 150 years ago. The next stop is a man called Dr. Joseph Breuer, a neurophysiologist from Vienna. Just a few years later, in 1880, he was the first person to use counselling skills to help someone, in his case a young woman by the name of Bertha Pappenheim, cope with the loss of her father when she was 17. It was the patient Pappenheim who first described the type of work that we all do today as the talking cure or talking therapy. Breuer was only in his 30s at the time, but he was also the mentor of a young, only just qualified doctor by the name of Sigmund Freud. Freud developed a sophisticated theory of the way that the mind works, which he began to publish articles and books about from the mid-1890s until the 1920s. Some psychologists love his work, others don't. but Freud's model of the ego, superego, and id hasn't really ever been bettered. He introduced the idea of conscious and unconscious. He recognized the huge impact that our childhood has on our mental well-being as adults. He recognized many of the ways in which we try to prevent our unconscious fears and needs from escaping, processes that he described as defenses. He treated many people, and his daughter Anna carried on his work. Freud continued to practice for many years, eventually dying in London in 1939. By all accounts, Freud wasn't the easiest of people to work with. He didn't like people who tried to extend his ideas in new ways, and he didn't like those who said that he was a bit cavalier in his assumptions. One of those who fell out with him was Carl Jung. Jung was just as well qualified as Freud, and for a long time they collaborated. But Jung, rather like Anna Freud, became interested not so much in how people become ill and how to cure them, but how we function in daily life. The approach that Freud pioneered is known by many as the medical model, in which the therapist is a clinician and the client is a patient. Psychology was beginning to boom in the period around the First and Second World Wars. While a lot of what we know about trauma began to be understood at this time, so we also began to study things like how people learn and how to motivate them. Two of the pioneers of educational theory were John Dewey in the United States around the same time as Freud, and Jean Piaget in Switzerland in the 1930s. They were both heavily influenced by the ideas of Freud, but they were more interested in people who were okay and how they could learn, study, and most importantly achieve more. They believed that everyone should have the right to vote, the desire to do so, and the education and freedom to make informed decisions. These are the tenets of what is known as humanism. So we had effectively two strands to our story, the medics and the educators. There was a third group mainly interested in making people work harder, but they diverged off into industry and business, and we now know that most of them were actually well off track in their ideas. The one major exception was Abraham Maslow. His theory of motivation, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, was badly explained by his own admission and was widely misunderstood, and continues to be today. But he did introduce a really important concept for counselling. This was the idea that human beings have two selves. One is how they are today, their real self. The other is what they could be if they had the opportunity, their ideal self. Maslow said that people who were able to bring both of these together, or were getting close to it, were self-actualized. Maslow was a good friend and colleague of another psychologist, Carl Rogers. Together, they are said to be the founders of the humanistic school of therapy. Rogers was one of those people who was the complete opposite of Freud in some ways. Just about everyone who met him said he was such a nice guy. Rogers managed to bring together the medical, the educational, and a bit of the motivational in one place. He developed an approach to helping people known as the person-centered approach. This was to be the biggest development in therapy and human development in the last century. First published in the 1960s, it transformed the way we see mental well-being and how we support people as they go on to achieve their ideal self. So, to try to quickly summarise, the skills that we use in helping conversations have been known for over 2,000 years, having been developed by Socrates, the Greek philosopher. What makes our use of them more effective is the way in which we do so, and this is shaped by a number of different theories. These theories touch on a wide range of subjects, from biology, psychology, sociology, anthropology, politics, and economics. These theories together form the body of knowledge of helping, counselling, and psychotherapy. We don't need to study these in great depth unless we want to, but we do need to know enough to be able to understand our client and their needs, what will help them, and how to work alongside them. From the late 1880s until the 1930s, most counselling was based on Sigmund Freud's theories of the mind and saw clients as poorly and needing a cure. In the 1920s, a different perspective began to emerge, seeing people as having far greater potential than they often realised. This strong belief in the huge potential of every person is known as humanism. At first, this just had an impact on the education. However, in the late 1950s and ever since, the branch of counselling known as the person-centred approach has been one of the most common. Drawing on a little of the medical, a little of the educational, and an understanding of human motivation, it has had a profound impact on counselling and human well-being ever since.